Welcome, everybody, to the San Antonio Realty Pros podcast. I really hope you guys enjoy this upcoming episode. We intend to bring you guys the best real estate content possible, and you never know, you might learn a thing or two. So sit back and enjoy the show.
You look like you do this all the time too. Do you have your own podcast?
Yeah, so I've got a podcast that's on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and then to be honest, I speak at a lot of national conferences and conventions and stuff, and so a lot of those have been moved to Zoom. A lot of our board meetings and just I don't know how much you guys know about what we do here or not, but I manage the law firm, but I also started San Antonio's first NBA sports agency, so we've got a couple of the Spurs players that we have right now as our clients, and some others that across the NBA. So just things have been going, a lot. So this has just been actually this was great because I had a client of mine that I was able to help out for something, and just typically what we do, and it was just something that I just made a couple calls for him, and then he's like, I got to be able to help you out with something. I was like, no, man, I don't need anything, and he literally sent me this whole equipment with all the amp and a mic and everything. He's like, that's the least I can do. So I was like, all right. So we put it to use. Yeah, we put it to use. So,
well, man,
cool.
Welcome to the San Antonio Realty Pros podcast. I know you guys reached out to us. I don't know if you guys saw our information in the Texas Realtor magazine for July's edition. If that's how you guys found us or what.
Yeah, I've got a great marketing team, and they really look for folks that are doing fun, great, just fun stuff across our great city and South Texas in general, and I always just love to meet new people that are young, that are hustling, that are just part of the fabric of what makes San Antonio and our community click. And so we're always just looking to get with new people. So that's probably how they found you, and then just read a lot about y'all, and I just like what you guys are doing.
Awesome. Yeah, we try to do like. We're actually building this podcast over time. It's been about 8 months or so. I think I recorded the first episode. I was reading literally one of our bulletins that we put out, and I was like a solo deal. And I was like, man, David, we need to really, turn this into something great. And it's been a little bit of a pain process because, you have to really devote a lot of time to this. It's not something that you can just sit down and say, hey, I'm going to do this every day. Especially when you have a busy lifestyle and a busy work life. So I guess you guys had reached out because you saw our property tax podcast about property tax and disputing property
absolutely.
tax. And so when I saw that email from your assistant there, I was like, man, this might be a really good opportunity for a resident expert that deals with this all the time. So I'm really glad that you guys reached out to us, and I think that you'll be able to provide some awesome information to listeners out there.
Sweet, man. Let's jump in. Yeah, property tax is definitely a lot of what we've done. I've done probably, we represent annually, upwards of $10 billion worth of commercial real estate across South Texas alone. File annually 400 commercial tax lawsuits every year, and then just to help a lot of folks in the residential side, just giving them good advice on how to make sure the exemptions and over 65s and just everything else that they need, right, in place. But property tax is a major issue right now for a lot of folks, and it's going to become an even more of a topic here as the country really tries to set, our state particularly really assesses how we're going to pay for all this stuff. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was listening to something the other day, and I don't want this to become a political post or video or anything, but the governor stated that, look, if you guys plan on these cities and towns, if you plan on defunding the police, we're going to lock your property tax in. You're not going to get any more tax revenue. So
I read that as well.
I think that's a pretty strong statement. But kind of back to the importance of being able to kind of protest your property tax evaluations. Where does that really start with the homeowner? What are some of the most important things that they really need to look into as far as hey, they're trying to contest this situation. They know that it's overvalued. If we provide a CMA, like David and I do this a lot for clients, we'll go and look up sold, properties in the area, and it's all comparable directly to the home as close as we can get it. So what are some of the most important things for them to kind of understand and how to the process, I guess, to take the legal route?
Well, so, really in contesting property tax, you really have to look at the entire process and really be cognizant of the cycle. And so one of the things about Texas that's very particularly, I would say unique in many ways is we are an annual tax reevaluation state. So there are many states that do not reevaluate every year. Texas reevaluates every year on January 1. So real property, business personal property, as it sits in Texas, is evaluated every year as it exists in the form on January 1st, okay? And so raw dirt on January 1, and let's say you start construction on January 15th and you're 100% built by, let's say, June 5th of 2020. Your tax bill for January 2020 will be based on raw dirt, because it should be based on raw dirt because it's all that existed on January 1. So it's very, very important to understand, that this is an annual reevaluation state, and the state. And so, do you guys want me to jump into a little bit about the kind of the cycle and the process, and then kind of talk about that? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So just let me know, cut me off, or if you want me to, if I'm talking about something that might be well known, but. Really, so so it's impossible for the state, for the county. And so each county is then administered by the state comptroller to value your real property as it exists. And so what they'll do is in this period, they'll evaluate your property and you'll get a notice of appraised value, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometime around March to April or so, you'll get in the mail what's called a notice of appraised value. And so that's the county's. And also remember, the cycle is kind of, it's at the rear end. So your 2020 tax bill isn't really paid until the next January 3rd of 2021. So they kind of, it's basically you kind of acquire all your taxes for the year and then you pay it the next year. Many folks in their homes, they'll escrow their taxes, get estimated, so that way they're not getting one big bill at the end, or their mortgage provider will require it. But so they'll send you a notice of appraised value and say, dear Stephen, this is your home. It was appraised at $250,000 last year. This year, it's worth $275,000. And there is when you have, as a taxpayer, the opportunity to protest or contest the value that the appraisal district is putting on your real property, which is ultimately what will be multiplied by a tax rate, and in which in October you'll get a tax bill. Right. So all it is just putting you on notice to let you know this is what we valued it at. The protest process is based on when you receive your notice. There's certain deadlines and timelines, but basically, put in a nutshell, you got about 30 days, give or take, to file your protest from when you get that. So it's very, very important, depending on when you get it, that you file your protest timely, to ensure that you have a right to contest what value they put on. And so once you've protested it and you've done that properly, so many folks will either hire a consultant, many folks, homeowners, a lot of residential folks will do it themselves, and commercial property owners typically hire a consultant or an attorney. But then you'll be afforded an opportunity to have you'll have an informal hearing, which is where you just kind of either pick up the phone. Right now it's a lot of by phone and Zoom.
Right. But
you'll get a chance to talk with the appraiser about your property. And then that's when, if you're not successful informally, you move on to the formal processes. So I'll kind of stop there if y'all have any questions. But essentially that's what you have to do. And that's the first, what I would call the first of 3 steps in actually contesting your property tax.
So my neighbor, habitually, every year he comes to me, hey, can you run some comps for me? Because he's always, if his property taxes went up $100, he would protest it. That's just the kind of guy he is. Well, because of COVID this year, he missed the deadline because the office wasn't open. So when he reached out to the county, they're like, well, you missed the timeline. You have to now do a formal hearing where he had to go in front of the county commissioner and everything like that.
Yep.
And they asked him, they're like, would you like your evidence packet? And he's like, sure, whatever that is. So he got it and he gave it to me. He's like, I don't even know where these houses are at. So I go and I look at it. And in the community I lived in, 1 acre lots. There's 26 of these houses in this community. No amenities. Well, they were pulling comps from where Steven lives. He lives about 7 miles from me in a gated community on 3rd acre lots with a ton of amenities. And so they were trying to compare his house to these houses where the builder's still at, and the builder's artificially producing a lot of equity in there. So I didn't know that they could do that. Is that something that they can do, or should it be kind of like, at least in the real estate world, when we're trying to price out houses and appraisers are trying to price out houses, they have to sit within a specific geographical area to try and come up with the most accurate comps. So would you recommend that everybody always ask for the evidence packet versus just trying to protest it based off of the letter they get in the mail?
So, I would tell you why I think it's so critical about filing a protest for anybody who owns property is that you really do not, and again, this isn't about the county doing something. What a lot of folks get a lot of what I call personal animosity. They'll believe that there's targeting them. They're like, there's just no way they're singling me out. And I would tell you that they're not. You have to realize that the county appraisal district is trying to evaluate every single piece of real land and business personal property that exists in Bexar County. Think about that for a moment. How many homes, how many pieces of land, how many pieces of commercial property, how many pieces of business personal. And when you're talking about that, that's like saying CPS, every single one of their vehicles. And so it's an impossible task. And so why it's so critical is to make sure that the information and the assessments that they're giving you are correct. Do they actually reflect what you own and in the condition that exists on January 1st? And so what you talked about is correct. A lot of times they're pulling comps that might not be relevant. They may not be they may not be the best. They may not be the most accurate, or they may not reflect the condition of your property. And so it's very important for you to be able to, one, protest, two, do your homework and research that based on what you know, and three, to be able to articulate the specifics about your property, right? And so a lot of times what happens, like how many times have you guys as real estate experts gone in and seen a neighborhood and you see a home and you go, how in the heck is this house valued at X dollars a square foot? And then you go into it and you're like, wow, this is beautiful. It's been redone. It's been refinished. It's got, it's just a different grade, right? And so when you go in there and you say, okay, it's not that every home in the house is $100 a square foot. It's about they should be equally and uniformly appraised, given the condition that given where they are with appropriate adjustments. So again, you can't compare an apple to an orange. You've got to get them kind of in line. So that's why I think it's really important to make sure what you touched upon is, running the comps, making sure the information is correct. We've seen, again, this isn't a county doing something meticulously about you, but the real thing is a lot of times they just don't know. So sometimes square footage is wrong. In so many instances, and I'll tell you, I've seen it in real estate transactions where literally you've got a survey, you've got a homeowner, you've got a buyer, and nobody's got the exact square footage correct, right? It's listed on Zillow for this, it's listed on Realtor for this. And so you've got to get that information correct and make sure that they have it so they can update their system. And so when you have that informal or that formal process, that allows you to be able to make sure that they have the right information as to why you're making these assessments, right? Sometimes roof conditions, you might have a lot of issues in a home compared to your neighbors and say, well, the house down the street sold for $150 square foot, but they redid their roof, they did their AC, I had to do all this stuff, and I haven't touched my home in 20 years, and I don't well on intending to do it. So that's the same kind of process that you have. So it's very critical to make sure that you protest it, and very critical that you make sure that you have the ability to truly, give them the information that about your property. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we have this company that's been on our podcast before. They're a local company in New Braunfels, and it's called Texas Measurement Solutions, and what they do is verify square footage for situations exactly like that. You've got an appraisal district that's showing the wrong square footage against what the builder told you or what your plans say. And so a lot of times, actually, David used them three or four times to verify?
Yeah, about 4 times so far.
And you've always had a discrepancy, right?
The same builder would always go to the county and thinking that they were doing a solid for the client and say, hey, this 2,400 square foot house is really 2,250. and thinking that they're doing them a solid on the property taxes. Well, if you don't have a savvy realtor that can kind of do some simple math and be like, something's not adding up here, spend the $100, have somebody come out, measure it, and figure it out. Because $150 square foot at $158 a square foot is a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so we've done it now 3 times in the community I live in because it was the exact same builder. And as soon as I found out about one, every time somebody wanted to sell a house that was built by him, I'm like, look, I'll put money on it right now. I'll bet you the $100 that your square footage is wrong. And sure enough, and I'm like, look, you spend $100, now we can list your property accurately, and you've now got a $15,000 extra that we can get for your property by spending $100. I'll spend $100 all day to make $15,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, big difference. And so that's the same kind of thought process there, is making sure that you've got the right information. That's why it's so critical to protest and see. And then at the same time, the protest process allows you to make sure that you are being taxed equally and uniformly to your quote unquote competitors in the commercial context, but also your comps in the residential market.
Now, we mainly do residential, but we also do some commercial. What are your thoughts on inventories? Because a lot of people don't know this, but depending on your business, you have to pay taxes on your assets and your inventory as well. So is there some quick tips that we can kind of put in our hip pocket? So if we're dealing with somebody, like we're going to try and, they want to have us do some comps, or they want to try and sell their property, how to kind of figure out the appropriate value?
Yeah, so it really depends. In the residential market, you shouldn't have any kind of inventory tax. You should really just be on your real property, which is your land and your improvements. So you really don't have some issues there. As far as the commercial context, it gets very, very complicated. So in a nutshell, without getting into a long explanation of it, is depending on how the property is being assessed is whether you have business personal property inventory as a separate taxable category. In most commercial contexts, or in more and more commercial contexts, the appraisal districts, by virtue of the state comptroller, have moved to what's called the income-based approach. And the income-based approach includes the business personal property inventory. So an easy example is a hotel. So a hotel has land, and it has real property, right? The building, and then it's got personal property. It's got TVs and chairs and all that. The idea behind the income approach is that it takes all of that value into account to value what the business is worth, the real property is worth, because of that, it generates income. So a room without a TV and a bed and a nightstand and a microwave, it's not going to generate the same revenue per room that it would had it had those features, right? So because of those features, the added revenue that it does or doesn't do is attributed to that. So those types of properties, apartment complexes, hotels, most operating businesses, what they do is they look at based on income and value it. Now, if you're approaching property based on other methodology, you could have business personal property. And then it gets complex if you're talking about, mechanical equipment, airplanes, cars, if you've got a lot of vehicle inventory, things like that. So you could have personal property inventory. But again, the underlying context lies the same. You have the opportunity to protest the valuation. You have the opportunity in BPP to render, i.e. provide them the information of the equipment that you have with your breakdown of how you value it or where the valuation sits. And so it's critical to make sure that you or your internal team are really assessing that, because you might have depreciated an asset based on the depreciation schedules. And so you really want to make sure that you're accurately assessing what those numbers are. But so it can get pretty convoluted, and that's where you'll see a lot of sometimes litigation occur because you're not able to resolve the value, can't have a meeting of the minds. But in residential, fairly straightforward, right? It's usually based on more of a sales comparison approach.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So what would somebody do? Like, say if somebody's having an issue personally protesting their taxes and they just can't get anywhere, should they reach out to legal counsel like yourself and say, hey, look, what does that process look like? I mean, is it a 1 or 2 time failure for them? Do they reach out to you, or do you think that they should reach out to you, in preparation for that?
Sure. So it's a great question, right? And I would tell you, kind of walking through the process again. So once you filed your protest, I always look at it as 2 ways. In the residential market, what I typically advise folks is if they have the time, if they have the ability, the inclination, or they've got a really good relationship with their real estate agent or an agency, to really try to do the protest themselves. I will tell you that the appraisal district is usually, or the ARB members, the folks that you're protesting to, they're made up of constituents that live within your county, okay? So they're made up of people like yourselves that want to sign up and be an ARB member. And they usually want to hear, or I believe that it's better to hear from the owner of the home themselves as to condition and characteristics of their home as to why it's overassessed. You're the one that lives there. You're the one that knows your property. You're the one that knows what it's worth and why it's not worth what they're telling you it's worth. And so I think that that type of evidence comes best from you or somebody that knows your property well or knows the market well. And I think that most of the time, rather than calling an attorney like myself in the residential space, is better to work with somebody that really understands, the residential market. Real estate agents, I know there are quite a few real estate agents that will that also do property tax consulting for they get licensed and they're real estate consultants for just residential properties. They know the market, they know how to run comps, they know what's moving, how many days on market things are sitting. So they're really experts in that category. But I think it is important if you're going to do it yourself. Couple helpful hints I can always tell people. Number one, have good information and evidence. Don't go in there just telling them how they're really upset about how the value is and don't have any information to back it up, right? Whatever information you can gather and can glean, organize it and bring it in there. Whether it's pictures, whether it's information that you had from a hail damage that wasn't covered, you've had foundation issues, roof issues, you just had whatever it might be, okay? Traffic, there's been a new traffic light put in, a new school came in that's causing you life hell. Whatever it is, go in with information that you can substantiate, show, and give them, right? You want to show them that you're there with real information, not just complaining. Number two, this is an advice that I give everybody, and for some it's very easy, and for some it's not. Some it's difficult. So I'll give an example. Have you ever been in a line and somebody's in front of you and they're asking for something and they're yelling and they're mad and they're screaming, and you're watching the face of the lady or the individual that's there behind a counter, and they've shut down?
Yeah,
right?
they've already turned you off. Yep.
They got zero desire to give you the seat, the upgrade, whatever it is that you're wanting. And I will tell you, in my life, I've made it this creed is that I try to stand right behind that person and be the next person up at the counter. Yep. Because my deal is like, hey, Joe, how are you doing today? Oh, doing great, man. I see that it's a full flight, but is there any way, you might be able to get me on to the 2:30 and before you know it, they're typing the keyboard and they're working to help you out. And so all that analogy to say, don't go in there yelling and screaming and fighting with them. They're not there they're really not there as an enemy. That you need to really go in there and show them without that animosity as to why the appraisal district just got the valuation wrong and why they have the ability to fix it. Yeah. Right? And so, in my opinion, when you're there, and think about these appraisal review board members, they're there all day, every day. So if they hear 50 people coming in there yelling at them, the 3 people that are going in there with some good information and trying to have them look at it, they're probably going to get what they need. So that's been a big philosophy of mine to help people. But in the residential space, definitely do that. Now, there are instances where you're just, you're really not happy. And so you can there are solutions for you. If you go to the informal, don't get the result you want. Go to the formal, still don't get the result you want. There's binding arbitration in Texas that allows you to very cost effectively file what's called binding arbitration. And you don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You can go yourself. And that's a great process that Texas has afforded, primarily residential folks and commercial properties under a certain value to be able to have access to the system without having to spend so much money.
Yeah.
So in reality, if you're debating, let's say $100,000 in value, and that's a big number, but in reality, that's about $2,500, right? In real dollars, in real tax dollars, about, depending on your tax rate and exemption, it's only about $2,500. So it's hard to go hire a lawyer, go to court, have filing fees, and do all that, and actually come away with something. So the binding arbitration process is a great example. So if you've got a $50,000 value dispute, you're talking about $1,200, $1,300, you can still afford yourself that process. Commercial property owners, I almost always recommend them contact, a professional, whether it's a property tax consultant at the first level, and then make sure that they have a good property tax attorney at the second level, because it can get very complicated. You want to be careful about what type of information you're producing in litigation, because again, it can become subject to certain things, public records requests and information like that. So you want to be careful about your business records that you're giving out. But that's essentially the process. So for residential folks, my suggestion is be prepared, go in there with the attitude that you want them to help you, and usually can come out successful.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the old saying is documentation beats conversation. You definitely want to position yourself in the strongest way possible. And then the other is the golden rule. You want to treat these people the way that you would want somebody coming and talking to you about contesting some situation. They already know that you're showing up and you're not happy, obviously. So, or that you have an issue. It's not that you're not happy, but you're already there to make sure that you want to contest what their findings are. So there's no point in getting upset and trying to make a scene, because it's not definitely going to help you. Most of these people are just going to tell you to kick rocks, and going to fight you all the way because they have more time and resources than you as a person to make sure that they prove their point. But as long as you have your paperwork, it seems like that's probably always going to be the best bet.
Absolutely.
Well, man, look, I know we're getting kind of short on time, and I think we could probably do a couple of these episodes. So if that's something that you guys are interested in doing, we can definitely set something up down the road and kind of dive into some of these specific topics if you'd like, and maybe even get into a little bit of your practice there at your firm and learn a little bit more about you. And I really just wanted to say that I appreciate you coming on and giving us the amount of information that you were able to in the short amount of time that we had today. But
anytime. Well, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you guys are doing. If there's ever anything I can help you guys with, let me know. But again, I always tell property owners that this is a fundamental right that you have, in my opinion, that the Texas State Constitution and thankfully our country allows us to have, is the right to own property. And in taxation is one way that can affect our rights to own, really own what we have, right? And so it's important to protect it. It's important to make sure it's correct. And ultimately, what many of you guys talked about is it also affects your resale value, right? Because as we know, we all, as owners, we might be looking at a property based on its price, but really what we're doing is we're looking at what we can afford on a monthly basis, right? And so when you take into it, we all know it's not just your mortgage payment. It's your mortgage payment. It's your principal, your interest, your property taxes, your insurance, your HOA fees. That's what you're really looking to afford, right? And we all know that adds up in significant amounts, because if it was just a mortgage, many of us would be buying houses far beyond the numbers that we do, right? And so it's very, very important. Last thing, if I can give a couple of tips to people, that are in the residence, make sure that they've got all of the appropriate exemptions filed and timely. There are multiple exemptions that are available to disabled veterans, to those over 65, those that are surviving spouse of somebody who's over 65, homestead exemptions, all of us that own a home entitled to those homestead exemptions. So, it's very, very important to make sure that you've got those filed and in place, because they can save you a significant amount of money. And it's critical, right? And so I always say, make sure you do that. A lot of times, so many times I see that those exemptions aren't in place, and it just, it's money that you really are just giving away, and you can use that opportunity, especially in times like this, for many other things. So just make sure that you've got all your exemptions in place, and also just don't take it for granted because it's there. Because a lot of times, the appraisal district has the right to kind of pull those and kind of have you go back and confirm the paperwork's still accurate and correct. And so make sure that you're looking at that when you get that tax statement. If you're fine with the value, fine. Make sure that the homestead exemption over 65, whether you got a disabled veteran, there's so many different exemptions in place. Make sure that you're taking advantage of those.
Absolutely.
Awesome. How can people reach out to you and your company if they have questions or need your help?
Always great question. Easy way to get a hold of us. You can find us all over social media. You can find us at Patel Gains, and that's PATELGAINES.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can always give us a call at the office at 210-460-7787. You can email us at info at patelgains.com. But just if you ever have any question, have any needs, let us know. And guys, keep doing what you guys are doing. If you ever need me again, don't hesitate to reach out. And I appreciate it. I'm glad I got a chance to meet y'all.
Yeah, appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule too. So we hope you have a great day.
Absolutely.
Anytime. Take care, guys. Best of luck.
Yeah. All right,
bye, guys.
Take care.
See you.